Welcome back to the Recovering Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Charles Van Laux. Today, I'd like to talk about knowledge versus action. Now, I think this can take many different forms in life and recovery, but I'll start with treatment centers and that kind of recovery. So, I've met people who have been to, countless treatment centers, right? 10 plus. And it's interesting when we start to talk about treatment and how they have felt like maybe it wasn't as helpful for them as they would have thought. And I've always kind of challenged that because, my own personal experience in a treatment center was good. It was difficult. It was everything, but it was good. The long run it was really good. It's what I needed, for my recovery, right? But I think, if you've been to a treatment center before, and I just think it's important to make sure you don't go into another one with the state of mind of, oh, I've already learned all this. I know all this stuff. I'm going to just kind of tune it out, or that doesn't apply to me, or this, or whatever. If you're considering going into treatment, I think the best thing that you could possibly do is be vulnerable, is open up, is allow these people in, be as honest as you can, right? We're only as sick as our secrets, as they say, And I think that once we can actually open up and get all that dark, old stuff off our chest, right? Those things we've been holding on to for years. Then when we get all that out, then we have the ability to start over. Then we can, allow some new things in. So I think sometimes, certain types of treatment can be helpful for certain people, right? Like, for example, if you are a dual diagnosis person, for example, who has addiction as well as mental health, right? I think then, going to a facility that specializes in that will be very helpful, right? If you connect with nature, a wilderness program could be a fantastic choice. It's whatever allows you to connect and trust and open up and allow these people to help, right? So let me get back to this knowledge versus action thing. So I think that sometimes for these people who have been to, multiple treatment centers and, they're still struggling, I think sometimes it's maybe not the knowledge part. Sometimes it's the action part when you get out. In my opinion, the hard part of recovery is not being in a treatment center. It's not going through all of that, right? The hard part to me is getting out of treatment and getting back to life, right? And figuring out where we can have these moments of action in our recovery to actually make it last, right? To put these tools and this knowledge that we've learned to good use when we get out, right? I think that's the hard part. So, if you are, going to treatment for the first time, or, going to treatment center number 27 or whatever it is, right? I think it's going to be really important to address, where you can put that action into your recovery, how to apply those tools and those things you're learning to a real life situation. I think that's the hard part, is putting those tools and things you've learned into a real life situation on the fly, right? So, some people will, they'll go into treatment and they'll think, okay, cool, I'm clean, everything's good, life's going to be easy now, all my problems are going to go away, right? And unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way, right? Just because we remove that substance from our life, it doesn't mean that the rest of our life still doesn't need some change, And I think that's one of the more common things that I hear. People are willing to give up a substance, but maybe they're not willing to give up that friend, that friend who's been with them since day one, and you guys took this hard left, and together, right? And started experimenting together, or whatever the situation is. Sometimes that can be hard, but when we remove only the substance from our life, all we've done is remove our way of coping with that entire situation, right? That's where these tools come in. That's where these coping skills come in, and these different tools that can help us through those moments and those situations. And for me, um, you know, it was painful, but I had to let go of probably 90% of my friends, and it was just kind of what I needed at that time to, get to this long term place in recovery that I am today. And some of them have come back into my life, and some of them haven't. But kind of the way I look at that is, one day we might be good supports for one another, but today just doesn't happen to be that day. Maybe tomorrow, you know? So, I mean, I think that being able to take a real life situation that's triggering and it's emotional, right? And being able to have a plan in place for that kind of situation and have a tool in place too can be very, very helpful. So I like to call that safety planning. So, kind of the way I think about it is, any situation that I'm going to go into that I feel could be potentially triggering, I have a safety plan in place, right? Sometimes it's, as soon as I'm done with this particular triggering situation, I immediately have somebody ready to call. Sometimes it's, I'll have a special song queued up, ready to go. Whatever is, meaningful and impactful to you. Because the whole idea there is to protect ourselves from our addict selves, essentially, right? Because if we have too much, you know, in between time from the triggering event to when we get home, for example, this is the dangerous area, right? This is when we can take a hard left and say, oh, nope, there's a liquor store, I'm making a U turn, right? So that's the dangerous part right there. So, I think it can be very helpful to have these kinds of safety plans in place and also do steps down in care. Like if you're going to go to treatment, I would say part of the aftercare planning that you do before you leave, I think it would be really helpful to address some potentially triggering situations that might be coming up for you when you get out, and have these tools and plans in place before you go there, because it's really difficult. I'm even going to say nearly impossible, but it's very, very difficult to, on the fly, out of the blue, come up with a plan and a tool for a very triggering situation when you've never done that before, when it's brand new. It's very, very difficult. So, there are some things that we just kind of have to plan ahead for when we, are in recovery and when we're, getting out of treatment or in early recovery. But I think that's the whole helpful idea behind different levels of care also. So you might start off with a treatment center where it's very controlled. You're not going to be getting drugs there, right? And you go from that treatment center to a step down in care, right? Maybe that treatment center has an aftercare program where you live nearby and you come there for classes and one-on-ones and all that kind of stuff, right? Maybe it's sober living, because the whole idea behind any of those aftercare things is, when you have a step down in care, like this is treatment, right? This is very, you're not getting drugs here, right? Very solid. So you want to have as small of a step down as you can for your comfort level, of course, to where it's like, okay, now I can have some more freedom. I can experience some other things, but I have a safe therapeutic community to return to process through it, right? Did it go well? Was it difficult? What did I learn from it? You know, and keep in mind, if something, does happen, if you do have a slip, it's important not to take that so hard. I think everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but most people who have a relapse, it's seen as a very negative thing in their eyes. They beat themselves up, they this, they that, they call it a failure, all this stuff, right? But it's not, it's a slip, right? The important part is not focusing on whether we slipped or not, right? The important part is, did I learn from that, right? How am I going to get up? How am I going to move forward? Where am I going, right? I mean, over time, you're going to build up a lot of information and a lot of knowledge as to where some of those slippery spots are, you know? Matter of fact, that's something that I've, done that's been really helpful over the years. I'll go to, different fellowship meetings, and I try to listen to people's stories, and if they've had some slips or setbacks or whatever, I kind of think of it like a map, right? They're giving me coordinates on their map of like, oh, here, G7, right? Like battleship or whatever, right? G7 over here, went to a party with, some friends, and people were using and thought I was strong enough, right? Like, okay, I got it. That right there can cause a relapse potentially. So I can sit and listen to these people's stories, gain and plot their points on my map, right? And then I can know, without having to go through, all the pain and heartache myself, I can learn from those slips, and I can learn from those things, and, start to build my recovery more solid from it. So I would say it's, if you're open to meetings, everyone's recovery is different. Meetings are helpful for some people, not for others. There isn't any one size fits all, but if you're one of those people who finds meetings to be helpful, try to um, view and listen from that lens, trying to gain their knowledge and their wisdom, because I think oftentimes, even something like that can make all the difference in the world. you know Another thing, speaking of parties and whatnot, another thing is that I've heard people talk before about, they want to test their recovery. They want to see where they stand, and that can take all kinds of different forms. I've even heard before, someone will have a bag of whatever their substance was in their nightstand drawer. Now, they say to themselves, it's there so that I can prove that I'm stronger than it. Right? Now, personally, I think that's a really bad idea. I think that's a really bad idea. It makes the steps needed toward creating a relapse way too easy, right? Like, if we have one of those days, the worst day we've ever had, right? We might be thinking to ourselves, oh man, it might be, nice to use. And then we start to go through the different steps, like, oh, I would call this person. Oh, I deleted their number. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, I could do this or that, whatever. The harder we can make it for ourselves in that moment of weakness, right? In that dark, isolated, lonely moment, the harder we can make it on ourselves, the better. And if your substance is sitting in that drawer, that's way too easy, and way too tempting, honestly. So, I think it's, important to be cautious. For me, at least, it was important for me to be cautious, especially in my early recovery. And, like, if there was a party or something where I had a pretty good idea of who would be there, and what they would be using and blah blah blah, I oftentimes would not go. I mean, the way I look at it is, the upside from testing our recovery in that moment is not even close to what the downside is, right? If we do relapse, if something does happen. So, I think there's other ways to test it. I don't think we have to, put our recovery at risk, but, we're the only ones who can protect our own recovery. We're the only ones who can, beef it up, or let it wilt, or whatever, and that's a daily choice. Those are daily actions that we make into strengthening our recovery. So I think taking the things that we learn from treatment, from, sober living classes, from whatever your tool is, whatever your, you know, knowledge area is where you're learning about recovery. I think taking those things as you learn them, and in the back of your mind as you're hearing them, try to be open. Try to be open to every possible suggestion that's made. Now, there will be some that don't fit you, right? And that's kind of by design, right? A lot of these places do a shotgun approach. They have lots of people in there from all kinds of different backgrounds, and they're trying to get something small that somebody can relate to for everybody. A bunch of small ideas. So once we find and try those different ideas, we're going to see which ones work. We're going to see which ones fit. And then we can dive deeper into those particular ones that were, the most helpful for us. But, I think as you're learning those and as you start to compile, what your recovery looks like for you, I think it's going to be important to think about some of those situations like I was talking about and think about like, oh, this particular tool. Yeah, man, if I am having one of those days and I'm stuck at work, how am I going to escape this craving? Right? How am I going to get past this severe anxiety I'm having? Right? There's all kinds of different ways. One of my favorites, get a little wireless earbud, stick it in your ear and play a little, guided meditation, right? Play an impactful song. Talk to somebody if you have that ability at your particular job. Do something to essentially distract yourself in that moment, right? Because if we can distract ourselves long enough to get past that craving or that whatever, it'll start to go away usually, you know, and or at least get us through that moment of work, and then we can rely on other tools after, like calling somebody or going to a meeting or whatever it is for you. um, so I don't, for my people out there who have been to many different treatment centers and still have not found that moment of clarity, you know keep at it. It's worth it. I know it's frustrating, but I hope that this knowledge has been helpful in how to maybe change our thinking when we go into treatment, right? And kind of seeing how we can plan and utilize all our tools that we learn in a different way that can maybe be helpful. um, and yeah, you know what, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, just leave me a comment. I'd love to reach out and chat. And I mean, there's always a way through this, always. We just have to figure out what it is. We have to take it one small step at a time and focus on just one little piece, right? When we start to zoom way out and look at the entire history of mankind and all our problems, and oh my God, it's too much. It's too much. It's too much. You got to zoom way in there. Just pick one tiny task, just one, right? Maybe even a couple little sub goals leading up to that, right? But when we're able to start checking things off our list, right, then we're going to start to see some progress and feel better as well. And it's we can't do this on our own, so make sure you're not holding this stuff in, just hoping that it's going to be brought up by somebody or somebody's going to ask you, hey, how are you doing? I mean, sometimes it doesn't happen that way, unfortunately. So we have to bring this stuff up when we're struggling, when we're hurting. That's the whole reason behind that. Girl getting rained on, but there's no rain around anywhere else. She's just getting dumped on. That's the whole idea behind that picture. There's a QR code leading to the show so they can, learn some different tools that might be helpful in the moment or hear some knowledge. But, that's really used as a tool when we can't pick that phone up, when we're struggling, we're hurting, we're in that dark place, we can't get past it. We can send that to somebody. We could post that as our profile picture. We could just post it on our timeline. We can, use that in all kinds of different ways. But, hopefully that's a way for people to, feel that they can open up, and people want to help. People want to help. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say they keep things to themselves because they don't want to bring anyone else down. They don't want to rain on their day and that kind of stuff, but support people aren't like that, right? We care about the person. We want to know, we want to help, that's why we are their support person, so try to open up and yeah, try to just plan for what those situations can be, placing the different tools and coping skills that you learn into hypothetical situations based on the past, even, right? Maybe it's like, oh, in the past I've relapsed because of this and that, right? Create a safety plan for those, because then you're taking pain from your past and you're turning it into strength and knowledge, right? You're learning from that, you're growing from that, improving. That's the whole point of recovery. That's why they talk about progress, not perfection. So, keep your head up. This is the hardest, by far, thing that I've ever done in my life, but also the most worthwhile, you know? And just remember that, there's lots of people out there who go through hard times, right? The difference is we have decided that we looked in the mirror and we didn't like what we saw. We decided that we wanted something better. We wanted something different. And we are actually taking the moves and actions to make that happen. That's hard. That's courageous, and that's something to be proud of. So it's, give yourself a break, be kind to yourself. And thanks for stopping by. And leave comments, please, if you need anything. We're all here for you. We all got to do this together. So hope you enjoyed the episode, and until next time.